The national parks are awe-inspiring. They're also full of challenging terrain, extreme environments, risky adventures, and poisonous and ferocious wildlife. Just in the past 15 years, nearly 4,000 people have lost their lives in America's national parks. So there's no doubt about it, our national parks can be deadly, but the number one cause of death is probably not what you're thinking. Here are the top 10 most likely ways to die in the national parks. Starting with number 10, which is a relative tie between two very different hazards. The number 10 cause of death in the parks? Avalanche. We've been there, climbing a snow-covered mountain at high altitude in Denali National Park.
And all of a sudden, we just hear this thunderous roar.
Ooh, man.
There's a massive avalanche coming down the peak of Hunter.
Whoa. Oh my gosh, that's a big one. Man, that is nature's power right there. That's not what you like to see when you're up on a mountain.
Denali has more avalanche deaths than any other park. Fortunately, this one was on a neighboring peak and we were well out of harm's way. There are tens of thousands of avalanches every year in the national parks, and the highest number of fatalities occur in January, February, and March, when the snowfall amounts are highest in mountain areas. Skiers, snowmobilers, snowboarders, and hikers are the most common victims. Sharing the number 10 spot as the most likely cause of death in the parks is poisoning. It's one of the leading causes of accidental death in the US, but is less likely in the parks. Still, legal and illegal drugs, alcohol, toxic gases, and other noxious substances caused 46 deaths during the past 15 years. Exploring the outdoors can be dangerous, and while people most often worry about running into a bear or an alligator, an equally terrifying predator can be a fellow human being. Tragically, 76 people have been murdered in the parks since 2007, and most of the murders have gone unsolved. Crime scenes in the wild aren't easily accessible, and weather and wildlife can erase evidence quickly. While there are some crimes of passion in the park, many crimes appear premeditated, and the vast expanse of national parks makes them prime spots for covering up a crime. You don't often think of plane crashes in the national parks, but they happen, and so do bicycle and boating accidents. These and other non-automobile transportation are to blame for 116 deaths in the past 15 years. To this day, dying in the air is still the most common cause of death in the Grand Canyon. 379 people have died because of airplane and helicopter crashes, and the worst accident happened in 1956 when two commercial airliners collided over the canyon, killing all 128 people aboard both flights. This horrific crash resulted in the creation of the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, which now has total authority over American airspace. Many national parks are in isolated areas where the weather can change without warning and people find themselves without the right gear and far from help. 2023, with its extreme heat, may go down as the deadliest year for heat exhaustion, but it's the cold that kills more people in the national parks. A husband and wife were hiking 16 miles through the Narrows in Zion National Park in November of 2022. It's risky any time of year because you're in the water surrounded by tall canyon walls, and rainfall hundreds of miles upstream can cause rapid and deadly flash flooding. But on this day, it was a sudden drop in temperature down to 14 degrees that caused both to become dangerously cold. The man survived, but tragically his wife died of hypothermia before they could get help. Mother Nature is beautiful. She can also be very treacherous.
I don't know if we were really prepared for 60-mile-an-hour winds, and that's what we're getting slammed with right now.
The wind is just going nuts.
Ooh, wow.
This is so crazy.
We're on the side of a massive mountain on top of a giant glacier. You mix that in with the wind?
This has got my heart pumping way more than anything we hiked today, I can tell you that right now.
But the weather isn't necessary to blame for the number 6 cause of death in the parks. People in a hurry, who don't pay attention to warning signs, or who accidentally step off a path because they are distracted by the view, are among the 428 deaths caused by falls in the past 15 years. Parks aren't like Disney World. You're in the wild, and there usually aren't guardrails to protect you, and even when there are, people ignore them, trying to find the best spot to take a picture. 12 people on average die every year in the Grand Canyon trying to take a selfie. In Yellowstone National Park, people sometimes ignore the warnings and step off of the boardwalks surrounding the many geyser basins. In 2016, a man fell into a thermal pool and was boiled to death, and his body quickly dissolved. In 2020, a young man fell to his death at Glen Canyon National Recreation Area in Arizona. When authorities recovered his body, they found the remains of other hikers who had suffered the same fate. I count myself lucky not to be among the hundreds of deaths caused by falls. Even the slightest misstep, like this one, hiking down the Black Canyon of the Gunnison, can cause a disastrous fall for yourself or a fellow hiker. Moral of these stories? Watch where you are going at all times and mind the warning signs. They're there for a reason. Hiking is the most popular outdoor activity in the United States, and the national parks are some of the best places on Earth to explore. But like any other strenuous activity, people often push their limits, and medical emergencies like heart attacks, dehydration, broken bones, etc. kill dozens of people each year, and 477 since 2007. Every year, the national parks attract hundreds of millions of people who are seeking inspiration through nature or the solitude of being out in the wilderness. But sadly, there are some people who come to end their own lives. This accounts for 493 deaths since 2007. And the number 3 cause of death is described as undetermined, which can also include people who take their own lives. If you're struggling, please know that there are people who can help and who care deeply about you. If you need support, call or text 988 and you'll be connected to someone at this crisis lifeline. It's available 24 hours a day. More than 300 million people visit the national parks every year, and nearly all of them arrive by car. Which explains why car accidents account for nearly 700 deaths in the past 15 years and are the second most likely way to die in the national parks. Car accidents are more prevalent in parks where driving is a major part of the experience, like the Blue Ridge Parkway or the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Many people are afraid to venture into the parks because of bears or poisonous snakes, and to be honest, the national parks are a haven for protected and endangered animals, and some of them have been known to attack and kill people. But when it comes to the most likely way to die in the national parks, wildlife didn't even make the list.
We got a bear walking right towards us.
Believe it or not, wildlife only accounted for 9 deaths in the past 15 years. So, don't let this guy be the reason you don't visit. With more than 150,000 miles of rivers and streams and over 4 million acres of lakes, reservoirs, and oceans found within park boundaries, the national parks are a haven for water lovers. And this brings us to the number 1 most likely way to die in a national park: drowning. More than 831 people have lost their lives by drowning from 2007 to 2023. Lake Mead was the first and remains the largest recreation area. It's a hotspot for sport fishing, boating, swimming, and scuba diving. It's also the deadliest national park overall in the US, and the leading cause of death in the park is drownings. Even the strongest swimmers can run into trouble. For one, the lake is huge at 247 square miles. Just this summer, a man who watched the 3 other people in his boat swim decided he'd take a huge plunge while the others dried off. To his companions' horror, they heard him call for help and looked over to see him not moving, completely stiff with his head barely above water. Before they could save him, he had disappeared below the surface. Cold water was likely the culprit and can often cause people to cramp up. Lake Mead is also prone to monsoon winds, and they can create waves anywhere from 8 to 10 feet high or more. Almost none of the victims who died at Lake Mead were wearing a life jacket. Elsewhere, rivers can be dangerous, particularly those that attract whitewater enthusiasts. The New River Gorge in West Virginia has a hazard called the meat grinder that has claimed numerous lives because it traps people underwater. We made it through the meat grinder, but weren't as fortunate in Colorado on the Green River in Dinosaur National Monument. Hell's Half Mile is notoriously dangerous, with 7 deaths recorded here.
We build up speed and we go crashing right into the first wave. We make it through, but it knocks us a bit sideways.
As we come up to the crest of the second wave, you can start to feel the boat rise up.
The day after we took this spill and safely made it to shore, a woman died trying to navigate this exact same stretch. Finally, when you think of drownings in the parks, you don't often think of caves, but that's where we had a close call that could have ended differently. We were in Spider Cave at Carlsbad Caverns, below ground about a mile into the cave, when we heard something that you never want to hear down there.
What is that?
Guess it's raining. There was a flood. There's about 5 inches of air.
As it stopped, this water isn't stagnant. You can see it rising. We could get trapped.
Okay. You got it, dude.
And just, you're just gonna push with your feet. The water kind of does the rest for you.
Oh, boy. Okay. This is, cold and scary.
Yes, it is.
You got it, dude.
No way, no way.
We made it out of the cave safely, but it was a powerful reminder that you need to constantly be aware of your surroundings when you're in the wild. One last thing to consider, of the nearly 4,000 deaths in the national parks over the past 15 years, nearly 80% of them were men. Put another way, men are 4 times more likely to die in the national parks than women are. Now, it's time for a reality check. While we've had our fair share of close calls in the national parks, and there are any number of ways you could die there, the chances of dying in the parks is extremely low. There's less than 1 death per 1 million visitors in most parks, and that's extremely low compared to the mortality rate of the overall US population, which is 8,440 deaths per million people. You're way more likely to die of heart disease, the flu, or pneumonia. So with all that to say, if you prepare wisely, mind all the signs and warnings, and stay focused on what you're doing, you can safely enjoy the most incredible places on Earth, our national parks.